I welcome you all to this International Literature Festival today. And we are going to start our first session, which is on Rise of Machines, Authorless Literature. मशीनों का उदय, लेखक विहीन साहित्य. इसमें आप सभी का स्वागत है. And most respectfully, I invite Sanjay Roy for chairing this session. Please, sir, join us on the stage. And the speakers are Kanishk Gupta, Kartik VK, Preeti Shenoy. Please. Now I invite Mr. Raj Mohan to please introduce the session to us.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And the automation is not something which is of 20th century phenomena that which started in 19th century. If you go back in history, we have the idea that to make inanimate things to work, to do work for human beings. That has been from the time of, in Greek culture, we have Antikythera. And then we are in Bhopal. We have a legend that King Bhojas, court, had wooden maidens carry and serve the drinks. So, it is something more than that. Human beings always thought of it, some kind of a utopian. Utopian stories have been shared maybe for the last 1,000 years or so. And not only in the imagination, but also sociologically, people were projecting theories. And then, not in one civilization, even in China, in Chinese culture, we have that. And very clearly, one person who asked this question, not only for doing manual things, mechanical things, the machines are going to be more than all that. Jiddu Krishnamurti in Sanen in 1968, he asked this question repeatedly in the conversation with a group of people. How we are going to adjust ourselves in the future, where machines are going to create religions, create poetry, but somehow part of us, we are not willing to take that. Machines cannot be intelligence. Machines cannot have that a priori, that intuitive instinct. But despite that, what we are seeing today as a chat GPT and all just ripples on surface. It is much more than that, much deeper than that. Because what we are seeing is a kind of whether it is a bot or ping or anything, all these things are just surface. I mean, basically, lot of effort goes into that, and the machines are writing their own algorithms. How we are going to face the situation? I mean, whether it's possible in near future, where machines can produce their own literature. This session is all about that, and we have very eminent panelists here. So my gratitude to all of them for coming here at such short notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody to this morning session, and thank you for waking up and getting here. And thank you all for waking up and being here as well in Bhopal. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Just a formal welcome over the stage. For the same, I would like to invite again Mr. Raj Mohan to please facilitate this. So before we start with Sanjay Roy, I would like to introduce him before you. Sanjay Roy, कला उद्यमी हैं. आप टीम वर्क आर्ट्स के प्रबंध निदेशक हैं, जो 40 शहरों में 25 से अधिक अति प्रशंसित रंग कलाओं, दृश्य कलाओं और साहित्यिक उत्सवों का आयोजन करते हैं, जिसमें दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी निःशुल्क साहित्यिक सभा वार्षिक जी जयपुर साहित्य उत्सव भी शामिल है. आपको आपकी फिल्म शाहजहानाबाद द ट्विलाइट ईयर्स के लिए राष्ट्रीय पुरस्कार प्राप्त हुआ है। आप सलाम बालक ट्रस्ट के संस्थापक न्यासी भी हैं, जो दिल्ली के उपशहरों में सड़क के फुटपाथ पर रहने वाले और कामकाजी बच्चों के कल्याण की दिशा में कार्य करता है। संजय रॉय is an art entrepreneur. He is the managing director of Teamwork Arts, which organizes over 25 highly acclaimed performing arts, visual arts, and literary festivals across 40 cities, including world's largest free literary gathering, the annual Z Jaipur Literature Festival. He is a national award winner for his film Shah Jahanabad, The Twilight Years. He is also the founder trustee of Salam Balak Trust, SBT, which works towards welfare of street and working children in the sub-cities of Delhi. We are highly delighted to have you among us, sir, today. And now I would hand over the responsibility of conduction of the program to you. But when you will ask somebody to speak, I will introduce the speaker.
Why don't you just introduce?
In the beginning only? Okay. Yeah. So I would like to introduce next our speaker Kanishk Gupta. आप साहित्यिक एजेंट, लेखक और प्रकाशन टिप्पणीकार हैं, जिन्हें scroll.in की प्रशंसित श्रृंखला पब्लिशिंग एंड द पेंडेमिक के लिए जाना जाता है। आप राइटर्स साइट के संस्थापक हैं, जो दक्षिण एशिया की सबसे बड़ी साहित्यिक एजेंसी और कंसल्टेंसी है। आप कहानी, कथेतर साहित्य और कविता के कई नवोदित एवं पुरस्कृत लेखकों की एक श्रृंखला का प्रतिनिधित्व करते हैं, जिनमें 2022 अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बुकर पुरस्कार विजेता डेजी रॉकवेल भी शामिल हैं। आपने 2022 मैन बुकर पुरस्कार विजेता लेखक शेहान करुण तिलका के साथ भी काम किया है और दक्षिण एशिया में उनकी आगामी पुस्तकों के प्रस्तुतकर्ता हैं। आपका पहला उपन्यास 2009 में एशियाई बुकर पुरस्कार के लिए सूचीबद्ध किया गया था और 2010 में प्रकाशित हुआ था। Kanishk Gupta is a literary agent, writer, and publishing commentator, best known for his widely acclaimed series for Scrollin. In publishing and the pandemic, he is the founder of Writers' Site, the largest literary agency and consultancy in South Asia. He represents a range of highly accomplished debut authors as well as award-winning authors of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, including the 2022 International Booker Prize winner Daisy Rockwell. He has also worked closely with the 2022 Man Booker Prize winning author Shehan Karunatilika and represents his new forthcoming books in South Asia. His first novel was longlisted for the Asian Booker Prize in 2009 and was published in 2010. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. Okay, so which one? Which one is preferred by the audience? English. Okay. So our next eminent speaker is Kartika VK. Kartika VK of Westland Publications Private Limited started her career in publishing in 1996 with Penguin Books and moved to HarperCollins India in 2006, where she spent a decade before taking on her new role at Westland. She has published several major writers in different genres, including Booker Prize winner Arvind Adiga, Anita Nair, Anuja Chauhan, Amrita Patil, Manu Joseph, Meena Khandswamy, Rana Dasgupta, and many others. So thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. And last but not the least but not the last, Preeti Shenoy. Preeti Shenoy is an eminent English writer and motivational speaker. She has published short stories and poetry collections. She also wrote a weekly column in the Financial Chronicle for many years. She is a recipient of Popular Choice Fiction Award 2021 by Author Awards from the Times of India, the most popular self-help book of 2021 by Amazon India, and Indian of the Year Award for 2017, Business Excellence Award by the New Delhi Institute of Management. We also welcome you, ma'am, to this gathering. So now it's your turn, sir.
Thank you so much. So again, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for Rajmohanji for giving us this very beautiful thing that matches all of us and represents this part of the world, so it's absolutely wonderful. You know, 2019, we had Marcus du Sautoy, who's the Simoini Professor of Mathematics from Cambridge, do an experiment. So what he did is he loaded all of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series onto the computer and then gave a command to create a book based on that. The first paragraph of it started with, "It was a rainy, misty day. Thunder and lightning struck, and you could see the castle appear between the mist. A Hermione comes out of the palace and looks at somebody, I think Snape, and starts eating her brain. And after that, it went downhill." Kartika, last night when I realized that this was the topic that we were doing and that I was moderating the session, I decided to do some Googling, and I went on to ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT if it could write a book. And what I realized is there was a whole host of things that opened up where it said that not only could it write a book, it could give you a headline, it could help you format stuff. If you paid $27 as a subscription fee, it would do all of this without giving you any ad breaks, etc. It would allow you to look at a particular author and use that style. So if you wanted to be Salman Rushdie or if you wanted to be J.K. Rowling's, it would allow you that. And then at the end, as you continue to scroll down, it also said it would allow you to publish. So you could publish the book. It would then help you market. It would then make a social media post. So it gave you this whole list of activities that it could do. In more recent times, I don't know whether you saw, there was a professor who was sort of accused of using ChatGPT in writing one of his pieces. But when they did the peer review finally, when they reassessed and did another peer review, they realized that the reason why people thought it was by ChatGPT is that it was cold and emotionless. And therefore, they blamed him for using ChatGPT, but in actuality, he was on the autism spectrum, and therefore it came out like that. So I think the question to you as both an editor and a publisher in our somewhat fraught times, good times for publishing because you've had this whole wonderful host of amazing books that have come out that have been selling very well. Do you see this, do you see ChatGPT, and I'm using ChatGPT primarily, though there are other programs that you can use to write a book, as a future possibility that can be leveraged or a hindrance in the creative process and its impact on publishing?
Okay, so that's a question we're obviously asking ourselves every day now. It's a fragile time, I'd say. We don't have the answers clearly. We don't even know where to begin asking the questions that we need to ask. But I have thought that this is a time of opportunity more than something that we should be frightened of, because I think eventually, if you have to be a writer of, say, literary fiction or poetry, of course it's possible for AI to put together combinations, and we've all tried them and they turn out quite brilliantly, actually, some of them. And you would be surprised that, you know, AI can create such quality.
In fact, AI is very good at poetry. Not so good at fiction, but excellent in poetry.
I think the shorter form, there are fewer challenges for it, and there's a large database it draws from and can quickly, you know, sort of use the algorithm to put together great lines. But with literary fiction, where it has to be sustained over a longer period of time, it keeps faltering. So, and this is not to say that the day won't come when it will be triumphant at this, but at the moment it's not doing this. But I have found that the problem is going to be in the gray areas of originality, plagiarism, what is almost plagiarism but not quite, I know there's software that's leapt ahead, and now you can put in material on various other softwares that will tell you whether it is taken from ChatGPT or anywhere else. But this is like an unending thing. There will be one thing after the other trying to back the other, cheat the other, whatever. But an author of mine carried out an experiment recently, which I thought was probably summarized the problem and the opportunity. He has written a novel. I gave him feedback on it in a fairly detailed manner, where it needed more work, where it needed more building up, where the character needed something. And particularly I said to him that the dialogue needed a lot of work. And I said, will you take some time and come back to me with a revised draft, because it needs all this work. Came back to me with a draft. I started reading chapter 1 and I was like, okay, he's got it. He's got the voice that I wanted him to get. He's got the setting that he had not got earlier. The dialogue seems to be working all right. I know I can work on this. It's a workable draft now. He said, I used ChatGPT to achieve this. What he did was he took my feedback and he fed it into the prompt, and he said, okay, I need a few things done here, like this landscape needs to be sketched out a little bit more, or I need this character to say something in this place, and what does that place look like? I want it to look like X, Y, Z. And it just kept throwing up options. So see, it's not an unintelligent thing, but nor is it something that is giving you a final answer for anything. What it will do is to say, okay, you want a setting, here are 3 options. And you can keep looking at that and say, okay, I will pick this option. And once all the options have been gone through for all the feedback, then you have a version of the text, and meanwhile it's cleaned up all the typos, it's corrected all the grammar, it's shown you all the options for how to make something, better in little ways. And then you have to do the work of going in and saying, now, how do I get this all to fit into my voice, into the particular logic of this narrative? And the vocabulary sometimes might go out of sync with what the writer is doing. So each of these then has to be worked on, tweaked on. But it's like an extraordinarily good editor at work. It's not so much the writer. It's not so much, someone who's actually creating material. It's like a really fine editor who's attuned to the text, who can give you 5 options of how to rewrite the text. So it's my job.
So hold that thought about the editor for a second, because, it's going to... I'm going to come back to the inspiration of... We've often spoken about people who we think have got a ghostwriter to write their book. Is ChatGPT the ghostwriter of tomorrow? Yes, we know that it's still a challenge today, but is it the ghostwriter of tomorrow? And therefore, does it then throw up back to the ethical question? And how then do you, as an editor, now that you've got ChatGPT as a better editor or as good an editor, how do you as the publisher be the discerning voice? And what, if any, is the moral compunction about picking up a book that ChatGPT has written or corrected or inspired or ghostwritten, as opposed, if it's good, and that's your value as a publisher editor, as opposed to, like you're saying, the gentleman who wrote something that you felt, whatever, the person who you felt needed to do more work on the work.
I think that we may have to rethink who a writer is, what original writing is. I don't think it's going to be as easy as ghostwriter takes over, and therefore an author gets a certain place in that hierarchy and the ghostwriter added on to it. I think we may need to actually arrive at a place where we are saying some kinds of writing are privileged because they come from a place of originality and imagination that is human, and the rest are something else altogether. But how do you then define where my imagination stops and AI's imagination begins to take over? This is something...
Not AI's imagination, because it doesn't have AI's algorithm
for now,
based on...
But that would be the logical next step for AI, right? To actually have imagination as well, to be able to take over from the human mind entirely. So at that point, I really have no idea what we're going to do. Are we going to be publishing at all? Are we going to be writing at all?
One of the biggest challenges, and I think as writers, all of you are aware of this, is how do you imbibe computer technology and knowledge with empathy. It can make a decision based on what you load, but can it find empathy? And whether it's the Tesla cars that have not worked, because when the decision to whether it should crash the side or run over a child, that's the decision that the car had to make. It decided crashing the side would crash the car, crashing the child may kill the child, but it wouldn't impact the car so much, so it crashed the child. Empathy became a big issue.
Yeah, but that's because that's the sort of database it has to draw from. The moment you start feeding it factors to create empathy, it will start using
So will you consider, as publisher, editor, commissioning ChatGPT, as you said, as an experiment to write a book?
We did actually. We said, let's do some 10 stories set in XYZ place done by ChatGPT. But we realized that there was already so much stuff flooding the net that it didn't make sense for us. It wasn't an experiment anymore. It was already being done. So we gave up on that and said, okay, let's just do the opposite thing. Sorry, I know I'm taking one last point. I just want to say that for me, the opportunity lies in the fact that, okay, the mundane can be done by ChatGPT, the basic stuff can be done by ChatGPT, let it do it. How can we as editors and publishers find new material, fresh material, urgent material that others are not perhaps looking at? And what can we do to change the discourse and the conversation around, politics, the things that are urgent to us, which I don't think ChatGPT can take stands on those in the same way that, say, an activist can, or someone who really cares for the world we live in would be able to do it. So we can go out and commission those books. We can go and find writers who live far away from this but do such interesting work that their work needs to find more place. And then we can help it along with ChatGPT. We can get great narratives out of people who may not write, but they have the stories in their heads. And we may be able to pull those stories out and make books out of them which were not otherwise possible, because now somebody else can write what is really valuable and in their heads and not written about yet.
Fresh voices is what Karthika is talking about. Kanish, you seem to be as the superstar amongst agents of being able to find and identify fresh voices and bring them to people like Karthika or Anant, who's not here, and so on and so forth, and introduce these fresh voices. In today's scenario where technology is continuing to play a fairly robust role, where is that distinction between being inspired by, and we know that all of us, when we're writing or speaking, are inspired by other people. I've just used Karthika's fresh voices, for example, to start this. Do you see this to be a problem, or do you again see this to be an opportunity?
Not at all. I think ChatGPT cannot be a substitute for lived experiences and the experience a writer gains from having observed something very closely. A lot of people say that ChatGPT can be used for research, to help you with some background information, but like the good novelists, the good writers actually do the research on the ground. I mean, sometimes they end up becoming journalists for a while just to, find authenticity and to make sure that their work has a lot of verisimilitude. So far, I have not received anything from anyone, aspiring author or a published author who's used ChatGPT for anything. Like, be it a query letter, be it, help with the, the writing. I think what ChatGPT can do, ChatGPT and some of the software that screenwriters have been using for a long time, it just help you structure and organize the narrative. But I don't think someone's voice, dialogue, empathy, emotions, I mean, they're very distinctive, literary DNA can be replicated by ChatGPT. I'm very wary of using ChatGPT even for my emails. So, I mean, and you were talking about fresh voices.
But again, Kanish, isn't this the difference between, say, our milieu, which is in India, where we are always hesitant somewhat about technology for all of the obvious cultural issues, as opposed to in the West that ChatGPT is being used. You are already getting poetry published, which is purely ChatGPT driven, and like Karthika said, the experiment that they wanted to do, they realized everybody's already done it. So at some point of time, while you may not get the same kind of thing from the national languages or the dialects which are so rich, of individual and original stories, you may well get them in the non-fiction space more and more. You know, so how do you see that as a challenge?
You know, in the West, genre fiction is very big. Sci-fi, fantasy. So I think, I mean, those genres perhaps lend themselves well to the use of ChatGPT. But in India, and even in the West, ChatGPT is posing a great threat to self-published writers who make a lot of money by publishing on Kindle Direct Unlimited, because there are, like, I just read an article which mentioned that of the top 100 books on Kindle Direct Unlimited, 70 or 80 were generated by Chat GPT, and that was eating into the income of the writer. So I think it's dangerous in that sense. But no, even non-fiction writing, even translation. In fact, before the session, I spoke to a lot of translators, well-known translators. They don't use Chat GPT. Yes, I've heard of corporate translators, people who, like do corporate writing, corporate translating.
Reports.
Yeah, they have been impacted because what is happening is that their employers, they are using ChatGPT to do a draft of the translation, and then they are asking these translators to edit that. So obviously they are not going to get the same rates. But I am not at all worried about ChatGPT, I mean, I don't think it will have any adverse impact.
So Kanish, will you tell us what is your process of finding these voices? You've had a really incredible track record today of being this, agent of all agents. But that's because you've been able to find the new voices. What is your process? How do you find them?
I think it's also because of my background. I don't carry a baggage. I don't have those benchmarks. I mean, publishing agenting just happened to me. So when I see a manuscript, I see a work of fiction, especially literary fiction. We are not comparing it to some similar work that was published like 20 years ago by some legend, and oh, this may not be as good as that. We treat every book as a, like a fresh book with a lot of potential to, be the next big book. So that way, and because I started out, I was relying a lot on unsolicited submissions, like submissions I got through slush piles. So we always make sure that we look at everything, I mean, if a query letter is good, if it's compelling, then we look at the manuscript. So I think it's just discoverability, and we've just been doing that for a long time, and taking risks with, like unknown writers writing on subjects that are unpublishable according to most of the publishers, like a book on Darjeeling, a book on the Chota Nagpur Plateau by Mihir Vatsa, which won the Sahitya Academy Award. It has sold 2,500, 3,000 copies. So I think it's also being genre agnostic, being open to a range of writing, because, and that comes from the fact that I'm not very opinionated as an agent. So,
again, one of the experiments we did, in fact, in Belfast was that we showed a Van Gogh, an original Van Gogh on the screen, but we also showed a computer-generated image of what the artist's work could be by being able to back-end that particular system with all of Van Gogh's work. And then we asked the audience to choose which was the original work. 98% of the audience chose the right work, which was Van Gogh's originality. And then when we did the inquiry as to how did that happen, the answer was very interesting. Van Gogh in itself was not perfect. The computer-generated work was perfect. Kanishk, is there something called a perfect book?
Like a literary fiction? No, not at all. Like even the award-winning books, I mean, they polarize a lot of readers. I mean, it's how one responds to a narrative. So I don't think there's a perfect. Also, I'll tell you why ChatGPT will not work for literary writings of any kind, be it fiction, non-fiction, poetry, because writers, they don't really know, I mean, how the story is going to evolve, how the story is going to end. I mean, I know so many writers who are like, who are halfway through a manuscript, or they're getting very close to finishing the MS, but they tell me they don't know how it's going to end. So these are not the people who are going to ask ChatGPT, can you give me 5 endings, like, and maybe I can choose the best ending. So I think, frankly, fiction, forget ChatGPT, fiction cannot be taught, I mean, it can teach, it can inculcate discipline, it can inculcate some, teach you some skill sets, but great, brilliant fiction cannot be taught,
Brilliant fiction can't be taught.
Cannot be taught.
Most writers don't know exactly where that book is going. Preeti, you are amongst the 5 best-selling authors today in the country. You've done 15 very popular books. Have you found a formula?
No, there is really no formula, because with my books, what I do is each book I try to make it as different as possible from the previous books. Because if there was a formula, I would find it very boring. For example, in this particular book which you see in front of you, the protagonist is an 87-year-old man, and he's a very grumpy old man. He's fed up with life, he is angry. And then I've written a young adult's fiction where the protagonist is a 19-year-old girl who is, everyone in her family are super achievers. Her mother is a surgeon, her father is a businessman, and her sister has got into MBA and she's working in a bank. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. So everything that I write is very different from each other, because if there was a formula, I think I would fail, honestly. And for me, it's the emotional connect which I bring into the books, which I would say ChatGPT cannot replicate.
Have you used ChatGPT?
Yes, because I'm a huge technology buff. Anything new, I would love to try it. I'd love to jump in. I embrace technology, and ChatGPT is here to stay whether we like it or not. So what I did is I said, let me see what ChatGPT can do. So first, of course, the vanity questions. I asked it, who is Preeti Shenoy? And it answered. So I felt very happy. Okay, ChatGPT knows who Preeti Shenoy is. And then yeah, no, for me it gave me...
According to ChatGPT, again, it generated a very good bio. One of my colleagues did it,
Yeah.
but married me off to Namita Gokhale.
So fortunately, it didn't marry me off to anyone. It just, highlighted my books, which I felt great about. Yeah. So I said, okay, let me see what ChatGPT can do. So I copied the first chapter of my own book and I put it into ChatGPT. And I gave all my character notes, because I do detailed character development. So I gave it all the notes. So ChatGPT knows who Pooja is, who Arush is, and all of that. And I said, generate a dialogue between Pooja and her sister. Okay, and then it generated the dialogue. I read it and I said, I looked at it and it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous because it was so insipid. I mean, everything is right, but it just didn't work. It's very insipid. I said, if I send it, forget it. If I read it myself, I felt like throwing the computer and running away screaming, because it's so bad. So I don't doubt that perhaps in future when it gets the emotional intelligence, it might generate books, but I think we are a long way away, because it just couldn't copy my own voice. So I expected it that, okay, here's this thing everyone is talking about. Perhaps it will copy my voice and it will generate something. It utterly failed. So,
Preeti, a lot of writers say that book that they've written, and especially some of the most successful books, came to them.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, Vikram Seth, who has a whole process by which he plots, all his characters, etc. The book came. What is your process? Do you receive the story, or do you just start writing and the story flows, or a character takes over? What is your own process?
it starts with an idea for me. It starts with an idea and something which deeply moves
So,
me.
Cranky Old Man, for example.
Cranky old man, for example. So I was speaking to my mother and she told me in Kerala, and
Cranky
some of us,
Old Woman? No.
there's no cranky old woman. So she told me there is someone in Kerala, and there's something, you will be aware of this, there's something called Nadatallal. Okay, they take old people, whether it's a cranky old man or a cranky old woman, they take them to the temples and they abandon them. They never come back. And I was shocked. I was shocked that such a thing can happen. I mean, imagine just taking your parents to somewhere and telling them, like, be there, and then they never come back. So that sparked the idea of, why are old people so neglected? Why don't people want to listen to them? They have stories to tell. They have lives lived. And I drew from my own ancestral home in Kerala, and I was the only grandchild allowed to access my grandfather's library. And he had these diaries, which I secretly read. No one else, I don't think he ever knew that I read his diaries. All of this combined for me, and then I started plotting, I started developing it, and that's how this particular book, 100 Little Flames, came about. But each book like that, I have something which sparked off, which made me feel deeply, which made me feel helpless. Like, we can't do anything about it. These are societal problems.
Has your voice evolved from book one, all the way through book 15?
100%, 100%. So when I look, in fact, that book 1 was republished because when I looked at it years later, I said, oh God, I can write this better now. And then I rewrote it. So that's the book that you see there.
Kartika, will ChatGPT then also evolve from book 1 to book 15?
I mean, I think every day it's evolving. There's no doubt about it. I want to add one thing here, which is we're talking from the point of view of creator, editor, agent, etc. I'm curious to know what the reader feels. Does it matter to them where the narrative comes from? If you're confronted with a brilliant piece of writing, does it matter who wrote it? I know we live in a time when celebrity writers are the point of everything and writers have to market themselves. But what if that isn't the point of it anymore?
It goes back to the ghostwriting, right?
Not ghostwriting.
I mean, in a sense that does it matter that whether it is A or B or C, in this case C?
Yeah, if you're able to look at, I mean, if the writer is dead, if the author is dead, as the old thing went, then, and if you look at the text only, then what happens to this whole culture we've built up where writers are on stage and the text is not secondary, but very often it is actually secondary.
No, we'll have a computer on stage instead of 34 computers sitting here.
You know, Preeti, one year at the Jaipur Literature Festival, we wanted to get that the robot from Hong Kong who had done this question an hour, except that it was going to cost us $50,000 in fees, so we decided not to. But Kartika, coming back to you again, you know, before we broke off at the last time, you talked about maybe that the one role that ChatGPT could take over very well was the editor's role. Now you again know, being an editor-publisher, that an editor's role is vital in being able to evolve a voice. Because you come back with, this is how you feel that something would work or could work. Sometimes authors tend to push back because they feel that the editor has no idea or understanding of the work, and there's a clash. But in this kind of dialogue, will ChatGPT be able to dialogue with a Preeti when she sends you the manuscript saying, Preeti, this is what you need to do to get it right or make it perfect?
So there's two kinds of editing that happen with a manuscript. One is what we call the substantive primary feedback, where we give things like, okay, this plot isn't working, or this character needs to be stronger, or there's too much disproportionate attention to X, Y, Z. So that kind of editing at this point, I don't think is expected of ChatGPT, cannot be done. So maybe what this ChatGPT editor is doing the second level of editing, which is the copy editing, which is, you know, weeding out errors, making sure the sentences are read as well as they can be, etc. But that first level of editing, I think, is still a very human, instinct-propelled sort of interaction with the author. That, I think, is not going anywhere at the moment.
But again, when you're talking about the second level of getting the sentence right or the paragraph right, today, especially in the Indian context, where people writing, say, in English, which is ChatGPT's present language, you're still doing English, or you're still doing a mixture of Bengali and English, or Malayalam in English, or Tamil in English. If ChatGPT was to correct that paragraph, etc., it would completely change the nuance.
See, that's why it's clever. It does not change. It gives you options. It points you to a possible problem and says, do you need to do something about this? And these are the things you can do about it. And then you can take so the author could take the decision on whether it needs to be done or not. So it's actually a kind of helpful level of editing. It's not assertive, and it's not saying to you, this is the way it should be. It's just saying to the author, hold on, okay, your editor. Remember also that editors can be very different. There are editors and then there are editors. And a lot of people now are self-publishing. So there's this whole lot of writers across India, if we're talking about India, who don't have any editorial help at all. They would have to pay for it, which they can't afford perhaps. There are lots of people who are not published by traditional publishing houses who don't take them on. So what do they do to get their books up to a certain standard, to get them even self-published? there is AI that's helping them. So it's actually of enormous benefit to a certain
It's
section.
an enabler.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked about self-publishing. I think this is the time for us to talk about that. Initially, I remember we ourselves at the Jaipur Literature Festival, if books came from, say, Norton or wherever, we used to put them into one pile and not really look at them. In more recent times, especially 2020, post-COVID, 2022 and 2023, we have featured works that have been self-published. Tell me, how do you see that industry growing? And do you see that again as, Kodak and when Kodak camera was the sort of way in which you recorded your world, it was meant for few because it was still expensive. Even the pick up and throw away was expensive. Today, this has democratized the way that we capture our world and our everyday instances or happenings. Preeti just took our Twitter, whatever, and she's already tweeted. So, do you feel that this kind of publishing, and I mean self-publishing, and everybody's done it, Bloomsbury with some not so great results, they got into a lot of trouble. Of course, Chicky's done it with Juggernaut, etc., but has now come back to doing the edition.
Entirely self-publishing, that's customized publishing. And there are a lot of publishing houses, mainstream publishing houses in India who are doing customized publishing, but despite that, they are not going to publish anything and everything. They have a rigorous editorial process. Yes, I mean, that Bloomsbury book, had a lot of issues, but for instance, there are even independent presses who are doing self-publishing or customized publishing, but they need to find some merit in the book. Now, the problem with self-publishing and why ChatGPT or self-published books that are edited by ChatGPT are not going to, help the cause of self-published writers, because it's not going to change the crisis of credibility involved in self-publishing. So self-published books, they have bad distribution. They are not taken seriously by reviewers.
But Ganesh, when it comes to, say, Amish self-published to begin with.
But his books were distributed by Prakash Books because there was a tie-up between his agent, and so that's a different kind of self-publishing. I mean, and Savi Sharma and some other self-published writers who become big on Amazon, so big that they can no longer handle, the distribution or the fulfilling requirements. That's one in 10,000 or one in 1 lakh. But the fact is that every few days I get a mail from an author published by a very big self-publishing company, I'm not going to name them, saying that, this book got published, it's not available anywhere, what do we do? Can you sell this book to a mainstream publisher? No, it's too late now. So it's not.
And why? Talk us through why.
Of course it's not, because the book is already out there. It's on Amazon. It's not easy to take a book from Amazon. So authors know, and these self-publishing companies, they are not contributing anything to the book, in terms of cover design.
Let's ask, can any of you tell, any of you here have used self-publishing? Anybody here that's used self-publishing? I know very eminent writers sitting here. You've used? Your experience, aapka experience?
No, this is not on literary fiction, but this was essays on music. They were very deep essays, but I found that there will be no publisher who will take it and publish it, because I'm not a music critic as such, I'm a music hobbyist. So I put it up on Kindle, while my actual books got published the normal publishing way in Tamil through a publisher, but such things which are sometimes very specialized, but maybe you'll get 50 people reading, 100 people reading, but you still want them to read, right? Those cases, I think, I have a reputation out on those people. They do see me as somebody who knows music and does that. So I put it up there because it's my thoughts totally, and that's the only reason I would do. But otherwise, yes, I would be hesitant of self-publishing something like literary fiction, which you probably want to reach a larger space.
So now the other thing is, Sanjay, that I keep getting queries from authors to edit their manuscripts, and these authors, they tell me that they are going to self-publish because they know that the book has no readership. If someone wants to quickly bring out a biography of a grandparent or, someone else in the family and, to commemorate some anniversary or birthday. I mean, they know that the book is not going to sell. In those cases, self-publishing works. I mean, and they are not looking for any other thing. They are looking for like a freelance editor. And sometimes they ask me for recommendations for a good graphic designer because, outside of traditional publishing and like full-time editors and other, publishing professionals, there's a huge pool of freelance, editors, designers. So, I mean, in that case...
Preeti, you wanted to say something.
No, I just wanted to add that, look, it depends on the end goal. What is your end goal in self-publishing the book? So if your end goal is like, if you want to be accepted in the publishing world, then I would say go with a traditional publisher because I get, like Kanishka, I get so many people who have self-published and they give me their books. Okay, now I want to tell them, look, I'm just an author. There's no point giving me the books because I'm not a publisher. And now I stopped accepting because honestly, self-published, whatever books I have read, the quality was really bad in fiction.
Control the entire process. They refuse to get edited. They don't want anyone to give them...
mess with their book.
For the cover, they want to decide the timeline for publication on their own, in which case self-publishing is the best option. I've also come across writers who said, we are not going to accept any suggestions for anything, and they want to self-publish,
So Kartika, today there's a greater demand that everybody is writing. We are 1.3 billion Indians. We have a creative gene that we are born with, and from the moment we are born till the moment we die, we sing, dance, tell a story. It doesn't matter what our literary levels are. You're seeing this huge outpouring today of writing, whether it's poetry or fiction or non-fiction, across languages. How do you as publishers deal with this? Because you must be getting, I get at least 20 requests every week to introduce the person to a Kanishk or a Himali or a Mita or whatever. How do you guys deal with it? And therefore, in dealing with it, do you feel that here there's an opportunity, somewhat different, but it's an opportunity?
Look, I think the crux of the matter at the moment is that especially in the English language publishing world, is that there are far too few publishers. There is a lot of gatekeeping that happens. Certain kinds of books are acceptable, certain kinds of books are not, certain genres are popular, some are not, and therefore books are taken on the basis of that. If you want to strike out on your own, if you want to tell your own story the way you want to, and you want to do it quickly, not wait for 2 years, not wait for a year, it is the only option you have is self-publishing. And there are lots and lots of writers who want to write, who want to tell their story. To my mind, this is like the best thing that has happened, because unless you can radically improve the number of, the state of Indian publishing in the sense that there is actually money to be made from it, there are actually writers and publishers and editors and, the whole ecosystem, as you called it, can do something to revive reading in the way that we need. Without that, who's expanding that market? It's not the traditional publishers. They can only do so much in a year. It's the guys who go out and self-publish, who will talk up their books, who will go to the stores, who will create ways to market their books, who will use Instagram, who will do whatever they can because they are passionate about what they're writing and they want readers. There are people who will call me and say, listen, I'm so excited, my book has sold 60 copies on Amazon. That means I'm doing something right, what more can I do? My first response is 60 copies. As a traditional publisher, that is the number of copies you would give out free to your first lot of media reviewers, right? Yeah, exactly. So then you're like, okay, but then when you look at it from their point of view, that's 60 readers who have read their work, who have put money out for them. So I think that it's the best thing. I think there should be more people writing, self-publishing, expanding the world for us, and in that there will be writers who find an extraordinarily large number of readers who will then obviously get picked up by the publishers who will see that as a profitable business opportunity, and so they will get taken into another sphere. I think therefore rather positively about this rather than negatively.
Preeti, I'll come back to questions in a sec. Preeti, profitable business opportunities. Your books have been selling hugely, and I'm sure it's extremely profitable. But when you started writing your first book, Did you start writing thinking that it would be a successful book, or did you write because you had a volition to write?
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say when Kartika said about people getting excited about selling 60 copies. So my first book was published and I thought, okay, fine, I'll have no problems with my second book. My first book was creative non-fiction, all true incidents from my life. The second book was a book on mental health, about bipolar disorder. It's about a girl suffering with bipolar disorder because it's this huge thing, and this was about 12 years back. A lot of people suffer from bipolar disorder. In India, no one talks about mental health. So it's a very nice book, gripping book. I had taken 2 years to write it, and every major publisher rejected the book in India. And I was living in UK at that time. So I got rejected not only in India, in UK too I got rejected. So I didn't know what to do, over 40 rejections. And finally a small Indian publisher took it on. The book today has sold over 5 million copies, been translated everywhere, been translated. So if then after that the journey was easy. But the thing is, there has to be someone willing to take that risk, because nobody knows what sells. And I'm sure this is the dilemma that traditional publishers use. And then later later even Westland, not Westland in the current avatar, Deepthi came back and told me, I don't know how I missed it. And sure enough, it's there in her email. Because publishers are inundated with so many submissions. I'm sure even Kanishk is inundated with so many submissions. Sometimes it's easy to miss. So then it has to be. So my second book, I did all the marketing. So I booked my own tickets. I went and, I called up a radio show host. I said, here's the book. He said, no, if you pay. Then I didn't have any budgets to pay him. So I said, okay, I'll send you the book. And then I told my husband, what an idiot. He doesn't even want to give me an interview on radio. He read the book, he called me up, he said, please come for an interview. So I knew that I had something in there. I wanted this book to reach people. So, and then I believed in it and I marketed it. And I believe in marketing. If you feel that you have a story which is worth reading, you have to stand up for your book. You have to tell people what the book is about. You have to tell people to buy your book, because no one else is going to do it for you. And the scene was different 10 years back, and today it's very different.
I'll come to questions in a sec. Kanishk, trends. What's going to be popular? What's next? I've just come back from America. We were doing prep for JLF USA. And everywhere I went to, every university, every bookshop, etc., the one thing was, do you have a book? You are bringing an author who's written about caste? This is America. So for them, Suraj Yengde and Anand Girdharidas, Manoj Mitta's new caste book is the big thing. How do you predict trends? And do you, when books come to you, do you have a sense that, okay, this may be the future, or this voice is important for the future, or do you set a trend?
So see, in India, it's very clear, non-fiction outsells fiction. And I've started noticing that commercial writing, even by the really big names, is not as popular.
So just for all of you, just for your record, 92% of publishing that sells is non-fiction and academia.
Okay, in non-fiction also, as an agent, I would lean towards, non-fiction writing that has a shelf life, that is deeply researched, that stands the test of time. I mean, I don't want to do a book on some elections, and publish it 2 months after the elections. I mean, I don't it has to be something which will, backlist well, we use this term in publishing. In non-fiction, because India is such an aspirational market, there is great appetite for self-help in the non-fiction space.
Not just India, but across the world today, self-help is a big deal.
Even business books which have some sort of gyan to give to the readers. All these books by the gurus and swamis, but in those instances, it's their followers who, buy a lot of their books. It's not buyback, it's just that they have huge following and the books keep selling. What worries me is that, travel writing is not doing very well. Ecological writing on climate fiction, they get a lot of coverage, but the numbers are not very promising. In fiction, I think it's just literary writing and, anything that is on the Booker long list or the long list of a prize. Unfortunately, after COVID, 3 or 4 major Indian prizes have shut down. So we just have, JCB Prize for Literature and one or two other prizes. We no longer have the Hindu Prize, we no longer have DSC, we no longer have Crossword.
Crossword will be
Yeah.
revived. We just had a meeting yesterday, so
It
Crossword will be.
Okay, chalo, good, that's news. So, and I mean, and these awards don't have much of an impact on sales, to be honest. Like the last 3 or 4 JCB winners, I don't think they've sold more than 5,000 copies. But if something gets longlisted, if any writer of Indian origin or South Asian origin gets longlisted or shortlisted for the Booker, they will sell 7 to 8,000 copies, I'm pretty sure.
Kartika, have you done any Swami kind of books? And if so, what I've been told, you know, because
I
everybody,
gave them Heartfulness, which sold and sold and sold.
which everybody keeps coming to us for, is that some of them have started using ChatGPT to generate the 10 best ways to wake up in the morning, or, you know, the 10 best ways.
I think it'll be soon Swami GPT, you know, there'll be a different section.
So should it be Swami
romance
GPT?
Genre-based GPTs.
No, I think they are the biggest segment in the market at the moment, the big gurus. They sell in lakhs, and all of it depends on how popular they are with their followers. It's not you and I who will go to the store perhaps and buy those books, but it's like a book is published, and by the time you put it up on pre-order, some 5,000 people have been told, go order my book. And the entire ashram, the whole network kicks in, they buy it. Then it shows up on Nielsen Bookscan as a bestseller. Earlier, of course, that used to be published, now it's not, but at least the industry knows that this is selling well. And before you know it, they've taken a photograph with Mr. Modi and shown that they're very powerful, which means that then 100,000 more people will go on and buy a copy. It's just like, now it's politics, power, gurudom, all of that tied together, you have a bestseller. Jaggi will sell the most books of any guru, all the others behind.
No, so therefore, again, as agents, as publishers and editors, what is your responsibility in this genre? Because finally, at the end of the day, when books are selling in millions, you are influencing readers. I mean, one of the reasons about why you shouldn't forward a violent video which comes to you on WhatsApp is just you're just propagating that for what it is. So a lot of the stuff that's come recently from Haryana, from Nu, and of course in Manipur, it is a question. What is it that you're doing? Yes, of course, you're making sure that it's being recorded that this has happened, but what are you doing by forwarding that to people who are not necessarily part of your system? So is there a responsibility as a publisher and as an agent, whoever wants to start?
Like in terms of the books we are representing and
Yeah,
publishing?
in this case, I started with the religious.
So in my case, I would say that the big books that I do across genres, they are frankly subsidizing the books I like to represent as an agent, which is literary fiction, literary non-fiction, offbeat books. And I've also seen this trend at writers' side that if we take on a writer, and if the writer, be it Daji, who published Heartfulness, which sold lakhs and lakhs of copies, and some other writers who became like really big after being represented by us, I do not like to, continue with that relationship because, it always leads to problems because these authors, they end up having access to all the publishers, everybody is chasing them. So but yeah, I mean, I'm very happy that I made lakhs from that book, but I don't like to kind of sustain those relationships. So yeah, I'm open to doing.
But do you have a responsibility of putting that book out? Say, for example, it's a good book, Vivekananda or a Gaur Gopal Das, or what's his name from Bangalore or whatever. But do you have, as an agent, do you take a responsibility? Do you feel you have a responsibility?
No, as an agent, I just have to be sure that I don't put out anything which is like really problematic. I mean, I'm not in the business of, selling a particular genre, and I'm not in the business of peddling ideologies. I mean, I do a Kafil Khan and a GN Sai Baba, and at the same time, I do Ram Madhav. I mean, book should not be problematic or, it should not have a criminal intent. So that's my responsibility. But as an agent in a market where one cannot hope to earn more than like 15, 20,000 from one book, unless, it's a Daisy Rockwell or some book that ends up selling 70,000 despite getting an advance for like a 5,000 print run. I have to do such books, you know, but we are very particular about, you know, the intent of the author.
So Karthika, coming to you, answer that question, but add to it, can ChatGPT be a policeman in this process?
How do you mean that?
Meaning, for example, when ChatGPT is generating a particular kind of genre or book or crime, which apparently it's very good at, as we were saying, should it, or does it have in its algorithm a need to have a policeman built into it, as you would as an editor?
You know, to go back to that question of what and how
The
do you
morality.
decide what you do, I think it's a daily battle. I think that almost every editor in a publishing house struggles with the fact that there are lots of things they just don't want to put out or propagate, as you said, or even give a platform to a certain kind of voice. You look at your list and you say, okay, all the things that I really want to do will sell possibly 2,000 copies each or 3,000 copies each. And then you have this one book that you're thinking is a bit dodgy, but there's lots of people out there who care greatly for this person, this writer, this subject, and they're going to buy this book, and you're going to get like enough money to be able to publish 10 or 15 or 20 of those 2,000ers. Very often you will do that book. As long as it's legally absolutely clear, as long as it's nowhere near hate speech, it does not do anything that we feel will actually be damaging to anybody who reads it. It's probably a bit nonsensical. It's probably saying things that you just want to laugh at sometimes, but it's not causing any harm. So somewhere you have to just keep drawing that line, but it gets very difficult when you're talking about politics. Like, do I have the authority, the voice, the ability to say that the right wing cannot be published, or I will only publish a certain liberal left wing voice? I want to, personally, yes, only do that. But you look at it rationally and you say that if it is a well-written, well-argued work, which has points to make that are valid, then I can't be a gatekeeper there. I shouldn't be if I'm a smart publisher, right? I have to put that voice out as well. Even if you resent what it's saying, even if you don't like what it's saying, I will still edit that book with as much care as I edit something else, and I'll make sure that it doesn't say anything that is nasty or demeaning to somebody. You know, I will take out lots of Nehru, for instance, because they only like to talk about Nehru in certain ways. So I might do all of that and persuade them that a more sane text is better, but I will end up publishing that because I do need that revenue to keep going, and unfortunately, at the moment, that's what brings in the revenue. So it's a difficult question.
Preeti, does the writer have a responsibility?
I have a question from Kanishka.
Just go, give me 1 second. Just hold that.
Yes. Just before that, we had talked about political connections, power, and how if you have all of that, your book sells. So I just want to say that ultimately, if you don't have anything, which I don't have any political connections, nothing of that sort, what according to me sells is word of mouth. You know, you like the book, you will go tell 10 other people that this book is great. You will want them to read it. So I feel word of mouth is what will sustain the sales. But that's what has happened with me. It's like all my books are word of mouth. So apart from the initial, see, you can only put in so much. You can say put in like, your publisher can probably put in 2 lakhs for your marketing, which will go in your airfares and in your events where maybe 50, 60 copies will sell. But ultimately, how do you sustain that? It is word of mouth. So word of mouth is what will multiply the sales. And does the writer have a responsibility? I would say, write a story that you want to say, you know, and ultimately like, and see, I don't think the writer has a moral responsibility to change the society because book is the slowest form of change. You know, you want to change someone, it's very difficult, especially the young people, to change them with a book. So that I don't think the writer can really take on the world's responsibility. You can portray something which you feel deeply about. You can tell a story in the best possible manner that you can, and you can hope that it will reach many people, and you know, that's if that's what your aim is. But I don't think writer really has any, because I think that's more like a publisher's job to see like, is this okay to publish, is this not okay to publish. As a writer, I want to have the freedom to create.
How many of you use ChatGPT or any kind of technology? Suresh ji has, okay. So let's open it up to the house and if, go ahead. Yeah.
Just hold on. It's a very, it's a very kind of.
What we'll do is we'll take questions in grouping, so I'll just sort of.
Yes, sir.
So Dr.
Just
Goel.
wait. No, wait. This is a very triggering topic. So a lot of people have a lot of things to say, but we have 20 minutes. So please limit yourself.
Keep
to
it brief.
Please brief and also introduce yourself. Ask questions. If you want any ideas, suggestions, comments, please take it up after the panel. Mr. Goel.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Goel.
I'm going to be very, very brief here, but let me go back to the issue under discussion here. Rise of machines, authorless literature. Now, literature itself has gone through a lot of changes ever since I began my life. I was reading a lot of literature when I was a child, but today, with all kinds of things, I'm reading more of diplomacy, economics, politics, etc., and the time to really spend on reading literature has come down substantially. Also, the nature of literature has changed. Now, my question really is, with a view that the literature is going declining in terms of reading, the nature of literature is changing. So is it difficult to imagine that ChatGPT could actually write the kind of books that people read, or people like to read, or have time to read, even if it is not literature?
Right. So I think, the gentleman.
Yeah, Mr. Kullar.
The reason we're asking you to use the mic because it's being live streamed, so they need to.
No, actually, Karthika had, I think, touched on it. So I was wanting to ask you, since you were discussing the logistics of publishing a little more, how do you grapple with the challenge of readership? You mentioned Vivekanand, for example, and I write a bit on philosophy for the Speaking Tree for many years now, but that apart. There are so many books which have come out on the man, that you actually get a little, puzzled as to what new is being written about. And, I was speaking to somebody, I mean, no names, but, I was appalled. There is a very old biography of Vivekanand by a man called S.N. Dhar, written way back in the 70s. The only copy of it is in the Sahitya Academy library, by the way. It is, to my mind, when I read it first, it was the most authoritative biography. It was a biography. It was not a commentary on his writings. So now, I mean, when I read, people are writing on him. This is just an example. People may be writing on different things, left, right, and center. And, you actually begin to wonder, where is the reader? Literary fiction, I can understand. I come from a literature background way back. But, that is okay. But in non-fiction, to kind of shortlist the question, where is the reader?
So I think that's roughly what's being asked on both sides.
One quick question. I just want to tell you that as we are discussing literature, this has already happened in music. In the sense, today, we have two forms of music. Let us say the popular cinema form and the classical form. The chat GPT type of thing has not got into the classical form because people have to perform. But in film music, 90% sometimes of what happens is from the machines. These guys just have to choose one beat, they have to choose one hook, they have to choose one piece of music from somewhere. And today, they are well-paid music directors, very popular. But if you know music and if you go in there, 60 to 70% you can casually say has no impact on him, and sometimes they'll say drum programming by somebody else. That means the music director does not even know
sampled
that.
something else.
So here also, as you said, there are, and these sell in millions. So chat GPT type of things, popular fiction may go, but the literary fiction could be like the classical music, where that distinct voice could be there. So this may evolve these two ways. One, just like how popular music is 60-70% chat GPT type, and the classical music is still.
It's a great question. So why don't we Kartika, why don't you start? So 3 questions. One is,
Last question.
go ahead, sorry.
So I just wanted to ask, as you said, that the spiritual followers, they buy books in bulk. So are they not the good buyers, or don't they contribute in your business? You said that you don't
He
want
said it
to...
does?
Yeah.
He said it does, absolutely, it's vital. Every publisher wants that.
No,
I
I
tell
just
you
want to add one thing.
how desperate publishers can get these books. So a few years ago, I received a query, from the followers of a guru who I'm not going to name, and I asked them. We signed a contract for 2 books. I asked them to send me a proposal. They said, go on his YouTube and then prepare a proposal on the basis of his talk. I said, no, we immediately canceled the contract. But the same book was published by a major publisher, and that book has sold like lakhs and lakhs of copies. So yes, publishers want the books because, see, and a lot of them, they want to publish these books because they want to publish a lot of so-called unsellable books, or books that do not sell beyond 2,000 copies.
I just would like to add one thing. Like, I also follow a spiritual school, like Daji, you said. We get so many things, and I mean, it's a spiritual journey, which is not, I cannot define, because it is all about experiencing. Okay. So once you experience the things, you want more of it. So that is how the followers, they blindly buy the books, because they get everything not by the books, but they are getting directly from the source. So that is how I just wanted to,
Okay, where's the reader in all of this? I think the reader is the most crucial element in this, right? For every publisher, for agents, for writers, whoever. I don't think they are missing. I think that every effort is made to find that reader, except that you don't... The big mystery in publishing is, why do books sell? Why does one sell more than the other? Nobody knows. We all sit in these meetings and say, oh, we should publish a book by this person on that subject. And at the end of the day, we ourselves don't know what is going to happen with it. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't, and we still don't have a formula. So you keep looking for the reader. And the thing about marketing, which has become so important in our time, is that they try and target a book to the right kind of readership, and they go after it in as many ways as they can to manufacture what you were saying, word of mouth, the most difficult thing to manufacture. You have to work really hard at it. You have to have the, from technology to media to, social media, all kinds of things have to be explored to create what eventually ends up as being described as word of mouth. So I think the reader is very much the important aspect of all that we do. But when it comes to people like what you were saying, the spirituality books, etc., there is a defined reader already. So in that sense, there's a captive readership which the publisher is aware of, the writer is aware of, so it just makes it easier. For the rest, it's a very large, diffuse market which you have to go after very, very systematically with everything you have. Every single reader becomes important in that.
So I would like to answer his question about readership and why is it not growing. So I think print is here to stay. I mean, that became very clear during COVID when publishers experimented with audio first. Some of the publishers published literary novels as ebook first because there was no way to print new books, and those books did not sell. So print is here to stay. Ebook and audio books are not popular in India right now. But they do complement the print books, and they also bring in some monies, revenues for the author and the publisher, because a lot of new platforms like Kuku FM, they are also acquiring audio rights in Indian languages. My biggest concern is that the sales are stagnant. So it's not as if like 15 or 20 years ago, literary fiction used to sell like 10,000 copies, or now it's selling less. No, sales are stagnant. That's my biggest concern.
It's actually growing 17%.
Gazillion festivals helping literary festivals? I don't think so. They're only helping the big authors. If you see the top 10 selling authors at any of the big festivals, it will be all the stars coming from the UK, US, or someone like Gitanjali or Shehan.
Not necessarily. It depends. I mean, in Jaipur, we've seen that it depends on the session. If the session, like for example, Michael Sandel, when he came, was completely unknown in India. His session was fantastic. Or a Manoranjan Vyapari, for example. When he came out with his first book and came to Jaipur with his first book about runaway boy, whose name I can't remember in Bengali.
Sex that got that sold a lot after the session. You know?
After the session,
What
yeah.
was the name of
I
that?
can't
Yeah,
remember.
well, that's
So it really depends. But Preeti, talk about this. But Kartika, going back to you for 1 second, is ChatGPT a man or a woman?
It's fluid.
It's gender fluid. They, them. They identify as they, them.
But can I just pick up on this point, what you said about the sessions and what I think you were talking about music. To me, between that authorless literature and the authored literature, I think one of the points of distinction could actually be performance. And I think the author is going to be burdened with that expectation because ChatGPT cannot perform. If you've not written the book and ChatGPT is written for it, you will go on to stage and you will, you know, somewhere it'll show up, right? But if you have created a work that is really wonderful and you talk about it and you can perform that text in a way only the creator could have, I think that's where the difference will be. And the difference on stage, the way they talk about the book, what else they can bring to it, those conversations beyond the book will probably drive acceptance of the author beyond the authorless writer.
No, I think it can be summed up in just one sentence. ChatGPT doesn't feel. Okay, it doesn't feel anything. And unless you feel, you can't really create something powerful. So you can create maybe a plan, an outline, some, maybe a character research. But there's nothing that you can't do yourself using Google. So right now when it's present avatar, I would say ChatGPT is more like a 2-year-old kid or a 3-year-old kid. We don't know whether it'll grow up to be a mature 40-year-old person. We don't know how long that growth is going to take. But right now, I don't see ChatGPT replacing authors right now.
Any other questions? Yeah. Can we do 1, 2, 3? Hi, Trips. Good morning. Not a good morning for you. So let's start. No, he's looking
Maybe
grumpy.
I'll start with Kalyan and Medha. Just.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to say. The discussion has been particularly on self-publishing. There is an assumption that there are no indie presses and there is no infrastructure for the writers to publish, and be recognized and gain credibility at first. This is how it happens in, say, the Tamil milieu or Kannada or Malayalam, where you have a network of literary magazines which publish, an emerging author, and then they gain credibility, they gain a kind of readership, and then they are published by indie presses and then by the big presses. Now, this milieu doesn't exist. This doesn't exist in the English milieu as far as I can see. And there are indie presses, say in places like Madras or Calcutta or wherever, but they're not being given credence by, the invisible establishment, as it were, or visible one.
The interesting thing we were just talking about in the
book
Booker long list yesterday, 7 out of the 13 publishers were, it's happening there. It'll happen here as well.
Every year across the 2 Bookers, it started happening every year.
So I don't know, but I don't know whether Seagull will be seen as an indie press, but it probably is.
Seagull is the connected person. But I'm talking about publishers like Zero Degree in Madras, or Niyogi, or Rachana, and so on.
Niyogi is not an indie publisher. Come on, Niyogi is pretty much a mainstream
Yeah,
publisher.
but they are...
Blue One Ink could be an indie publisher, but not. Let's move on to... Yeah. You take it up.
Okay, Ms. Shenoy, I would just like to say, commend all the work you're doing around mental health and feminism. I think it's crucial. The point you made about ChatGPT, I just want to add to that and then follow up with a quick question for you and, of course, for everybody else. I don't think ChatGPT can produce new work because the role of literature is to produce newer expressions in language, primarily. And what it is doing is reproducing new text based on pre-existing data sets. So all it can do is generate a set of cliches or things that were important at some point, and before computers can imitate things, imitative writers imitate other writers. So there is no way that we are coming...
No way yet. Like he said, once you start sampling music over a period of time, it will at some point. But right now, yes.
but I also think that the function of it, literature as something that renews language or expands meaning and stabilizes it again and again. This is not something ChatGPT can do because, as Ms. Shenoy said, you have to feel, to have some layer of subjective experience to be able to produce a proper object of art. Now, coming back to your work and the question on spirituality. Now, all this work that you're doing around mental health, we know that there is this giant wave in India that's quite anti-science, right? And the only way people can access this kind of therapy is through a kind of spiritual language. How do you tread the line between what you know to be scientific fact and sorry, may I finish? And rhetorical, using the right rhetoric to kind of complete the expression. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, the mic comes. Yes, you know, I mean, the received wisdom now among publishers is to accept ChatGPT, I mean, embrace it and so on. But Karthika, I wanted to really sound you out on this, that what do you think as ChatGPT evolves, and this is a problem that I am exercised with, what do you think will be the implications on copyright and copyright law? And I think that, you know, copyright law also needs, you know, will require tweaking and will require to accommodate this. And what do you think will be that? Because I see it as a problematic, and I see that will be exercised and there will be some problems in legally, yeah.
You know that in the new information bill, this has been addressed to some extent.
To some extent.
Yeah,
no,
it has.
We will discuss that.
Yeah,
very often.
okay. So for you, it's the whole issue of copyright. The gentleman at the back, Rajmohan, yeah.
My name is Ashok. I work in a technology company. So obviously, we try to do some experiments with that. But what I see is that the rise of machines, what it says, actually the ChatGPT is in an adolescent stage. When it will become threat, it will be a threat when people like Preeti and you and Sanjay, you start using and asking intelligent questions, because it's a regenerative algorithm. It tunes in the back end. So these are the jargons. But basically, when we ask more intelligent questions, creative thinking, and fit that into the database, it starts learning. That's where it becomes the real threat in creating something which will be, you know, a borderline between, you know, creative plagiarism type of things. So that to manage that threat is in our hands, whether we want to use certain things to design certain things, yes, but for nothing of experiential nature as of now.
Let me just address the copyright issue, because that is very central to what we are facing with ChatGPT now. I'll give you a very quick example of something called Mid-Journey. I don't know if anybody's used that app yet, but it's an illustration app. So you can feed it prompts. You can say, I want a gentleman in a shirt with flowers on it and wearing a cap, sitting by the riverside in the Himalayas in a particular place. And this person is holding a book in their hand. They're sitting by the, you know, whatever. They're thinking about something very soulfully. Now you can give this prompt. You can give any detailed number of prompts. You'll see this buffer in about half a minute. You will find 4 options will be thrown up for you of this image that you have visualized or asked to visualize. And they will be 4 slightly different directions, but they will all 4 have the essential elements that you asked for. And then you can sharpen it further and say, okay, of these I pick one, and then I'm kind of using that to create the next image. So what is happening in art is possibly more alarming and more fraught than what is happening in literature. And this question of copyright, I think the problem there is that where has the database come from for these particular styles? So here I can also say, I want this frame to be like a manga comic, or I could say I want it to be like an Amar Chitrakatha, or I could have it like a Rubens painting. Whatever I want I can say, and I will get it. So where does the right to use this image vest, and what was the original image that was used, combination of images that was used to create this? This is going to be the challenge, that at some point, even writing, I think, does not face the kind of contradictions this thing is going to throw up. And there are no answers. What we can do at the most, and we try to do now, is when we do, say, comics, where we are using apps, we try and make sure that there is an artist who is actually creating the basic creator, like the basic character. And then Chat Midway or Midjourney or any other app can be used to replicate this character in different situations, in different moments, in different backgrounds. And it's amazing. You try to create a graphic novel or a comic, you take a year to do something really well. This thing will allow it to be done in a few days. You know, so this is really, really strange and frightening.
In fact, Kartika, what happened, I was in London doing some bhashan baji goli to the Saudi government. They're creating this whole art new city called Kiria, where there's going to be an arts and entertainment city. And you know, as consultants, you have no responsibility. So I was giving them some goli, ye honi chahiye, wo honi chahiye, whatever. The guys generated the visual of what I was saying. And in like literally, when I finished my golibazi, on the screen they projected what I talked about. And I was blown away by, oh my God. And of course, immediately the architects took it forward. And they said, we'll create this. And I'm like, okay, I mean, you know. So it is a huge issue. And again, going back to the music, this thing, ChatGPT in the writing process, or in the literary process, certainly in fiction, now that it's been able to pass every exam, including the NEET exam and the IIT exam and the Stanford exam, will do so. And we'll need to look at how to be able to deal with that. Preeti, her answers to her question.
Yeah, so the thing is, as a writer, I am not looking at spirituality, I am not looking at a certain, I write the topics that I'm passionate about. For example, neglect of the elderly in one of my books. In another book, A Young Love, about young people in this confused world post-pandemic. That book is going to come out in October. How do they find their footing? Because they're confused, they have lost, no other generation has faced 2 years of pandemic like the present young generation. And it's just stolen from them. You know, my daughter was supposed to graduate in Singapore. Her graduation ceremony was online. So then when she did her master's, I ensured that I was present there because there's so much taken away. So I write about such subjects which deeply move me, which I'm involved with, and I don't think about, is this against science, is this spiritual, because that's not honestly my job as a writer. My job as a writer is to be true to my world, is to be true to my characters, and to tell the story in an engaging way which moves people. Like if, you know, people have read my books and they've told me I've cried. They message me and I'm like very interactive with my readers. So I don't think I have to concern myself with this, oh, is this a spiritual wave going on? Is this a religious wave going on? Because I'm true to my books, my world, and I think my responsibility as a writer ends there. To be true to my stories, to be true to the cause that I'm portraying in the stories, and to write the story in the best possible way that I can.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really sorry. Sukrita asked me why not we go till 12. I gave her only one reason, that okay, one person has to catch a flight, okay. But there are some people who come without breakfast. We ought to be, be kind to them. I mean, they all have to rush here in the rain. They ensure that they were the first one to be here. So, and also the next session has to start, and then we have to prepare the dice, everything. So let us stop this. And one thing, Kartika and Preeti, and of course Sanjay, I will come to that. Google Pallavaram ChatGPT. You will laugh. I will tell you, because you people, we should be a little bit more intelligent in asking what questions we are asked to ChatGPT. Even in Twitter you would search. You don't need to Google. Twitter will search. And some fellow, a lot of jobless people are there. They are crooks. They are also intelligent. They very creatively, one fellow asked say something nice about Pallavaram. Nobody knows what is Pallavaram. It's the lowest temperature in here is 35 degrees Celsius. And ChatGPT converted into a hill resort. And yeah, I'm just telling, there's a lot of dumb stuff also with that ChatGPT. And Kanishk, it's a much more deep philosophical question than what you are willing to grant. I know all these people, when I wrote this line, okay, not only old people, even young authors, ये क्या है भाई, ये कहाँ से लेके आया ये? So that's the attitude, because we don't want, a part of us do not want the machines or anything to be more intelligent and all that. And as far religion is concerned, don't think human beings alone are capable of inventing religion. There is a religious language, structure of religion, how to influence, and machines will be better than that. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Kartika, thank you, Preeti, thank you, Kanishk, thank you, Rajmohan, thank you so much. Thank you all.
So thank you, everyone. We'll take a break for a few minutes, and then we'll resume the session, next session.
You know what I
It's on poetry. Poetry.